The Gallowgate Shots podcast is sponsored by Tyre Spot, the Northeast's leading tyre supplier with branches across the region. Tyre Spot don't just do tyres, they cover everything from servicing to wheel alignment. They can handle every aspect of your car's maintenance. For more information, visit tyrespot.co.uk. Enjoy the episode.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the GallowgateShots YouTube channel and podcast, and we are here. It is a Tuesday night and I am joined by Harry Samio to go through the upcoming second leg of the semi-final clash as Newcastle United welcome Arsenal to St James's Park. Like I said, Harry is joining me. We're going to hear it straight from the horse's mouth in regards to how the opposition are feeling about this upcoming game. I'm gonna take it a little bit back, Harry, because what I've done this afternoon, I have gone back and listened to a couple of your videos and a couple of your podcasts, both before and after the result and the game at the Emirates. And a couple of things very complimentary about Newcastle, saying that we can be a very physical team, and we rely on that, which we do. I'm not going to disagree with. Also mentioned the fact that losing the game isn't a huge thing. You can overcome a loss, but when it goes to 2-0, it's a different story. I think when the fixture got announced, as a Newcastle United fan, we were desperate to get the second tie back at St James's Park, because then anything can happen when it's at home tie is the second one. So, as an Arsenal fan, what's your thoughts on this right now?
Well, my thoughts are much more positive from an Arsenal perspective now than they probably were in the immediate aftermath of that first leg, where it was a really frustrating night for Arsenal. It feels like Arsenal have had too many of those nights this season where, and listen, I'm not saying we deserve to win the game, because we didn't. You know, we weren't efficient enough in both boxes. We weren't clinical enough when it mattered. But it was one of those nights where we came away looking at the match stats and thinking, how the hell have we not even just got a draw here? And it was around the period of time where we had like 3 or 4 of those. So there was a lot of frustration. Like there was a lot of, anxiety, I think, within the Arsenal fan base about how that all played out. And I've got to say, off the back of that, I thought it was done and dusted. Since then, Arsenal have been a lot more secure defensively, which is something that, we've come to expect from them over the last couple of seasons. And obviously, they've just swept aside Manchester City as if they weren't even there at the weekend. And now all of a sudden there's a bit of confidence, not to the point that, we're definitely going to do it, but there's some belief now that it could happen. So my mood has changed from what it probably was a month ago. And it's changed quite drastically, actually.
I can echo that to a certain degree, because I think it's been such a big gap between the first leg and the second. 4 weeks, which is ridiculous because of obviously what the new format, the Champions League structure. So it's 4 weeks, and I think if that game had been played within 2 weeks, then I'm in dreamland at that point. When we go 2-0 up at the Emirates, I'm booking hotels and thinking, right, this is our game to lose, and it still is to a certain extent. But obviously, your performances at the weekend against Manchester City, the WhatsApp group for the channel was going wild, singing, "This is not a good time to be inviting Arsenal to St James's Park," especially with the consecutive home defeats that we've had at the hands of Bournemouth and Fulham. And I mentioned the physicality of Newcastle, which Eddie Howe's even referenced quite a bit in his post-match comments, that it just hasn't been there in the last 2 home fixtures, which is a worry. Obviously, like I mentioned, the game's still in our hands to lose, and it would take a monumental effort from Arsenal to overcome that 2-0, the 2-goal deficit. Of course it would, but we've seen stranger things happen in football. Of course we have. One of the things I want to go back to is, same as you, when I was watching that first leg, Arsenal seemed to do everything right apart from put the ball in the back of the net. You just couldn't finish dinner. I think Martinelli had a chance, Havertz had a chance, and Timber had a really good chance. I can't remember, one of them hit the post at one point. And it just seemed to be the other way for Newcastle, where everything we did worked, and that's credit to the high press which we're playing as well, closing players down on the ball. Your two centre backs struggled massively against Isak. He had them in knots from start to finish. Then the last 20 minutes of the game, we've got the famous 5-5-0 that were going, and that two defensive blocks of 5 and 5, which Miguel Almiron, it was the last thing he's ever done for the football club, running onto the field and tell everybody we're shutting up shop, which worked, and it frustrated Arsenal. What are you expecting from Newcastle's setup going into this one? Because we know that your setup, you have to come out, you have to go all guns blazing in this one. You just need to get an early goal, really. But from a Newcastle point of view, as a Newcastle fan, I'm still really unsure as to how Eddie Howe is going to set this one up. If we're going to look at blocking and that low block for, it's a long time. It's a dangerous plan to do that for 90 minutes. But do we go similar to what we did at the Emirates and try and get that crucial first goal? What's your thoughts on it?
I think it's a really difficult decision for Eddie Howe to make, actually, because 2-0, I know it's one of the old cliches in football, but it's quite a dangerous lead, right? You get caught in two minds. Do you come out, try and feed off the St. James's Park atmosphere, which we know is going to be incredible, get the crowd behind you and try and put Arsenal to the sword and finish the tie off? Because if you score first, it's done, right? It's over, it's finished. Or do you try and frustrate an Arsenal side that you have proven you can frustrate quite recently? And it's a weird one, right? Because I look at Arsenal and I think right now, because they're playing with a renewed confidence and because of what happened at the weekend, I'm quite confident in saying that Arsenal are going to try and get on the ball nice and early and just take the sting out of it. They're going to try and manage the occasion. They've matured this Arsenal team over the last couple of years. You saw it against Manchester City at the weekend. Instead of pressing aggressively all the time, it was pick and choose your moments. They knew when to press. They also knew when to just say, City, you can have the ball. And we're just going to drop that little bit deeper and go into a block ourselves. So I think Arsenal's mindset will be, let's come out and let's try and get on the ball and try and tame the atmosphere first. If I'm Eddie Howe, I think it's all about balance. I think balance is the key word. You know, you want to try and put the tie to bed, but you also can't leave silly spaces in behind. You can't take too many risks. You got to be compact in everything you do. And I think it's about picking and choosing the moments that you use your counter-attacking threat. What I really love about Alexander Isak, and why I know Newcastle fans hate this, so I'm going to say
it was only going to be a matter of time before I had transfer news of Isak going to Arsenal.
Why I'd love to sign Alexander Isak is because I think he could do a bit of everything. And I love the fact that he can run not just in behind, but into channels as well. He's really good at pulling centre-halves apart. And we all know that centre-halves, no matter how good they are, they want to be as close to one another as possible. That's how they get each other out of trouble. And I just think that, you know, if Newcastle can utilize that threat right and aren't afraid to go over the top of Arsenal, because Arsenal, as I say, I think they'll come and try and get on the ball early. That means playing a high line. And that means having Gabriel and Saliba on the halfway line. So if Newcastle are happy to go, you know, come on to us, we're going to go over the top of you. I think, you know, and I don't know if Anthony Gordon's fit. I'm assuming he is. You know, those are two players that running in the channels could cause us all sorts of problems. Murphy as well, you know. He's come out of nowhere as far as us non-Newcastle fans are concerned, but he looks great at the minute. So yeah. I think be direct, be balanced. I think that's probably what Newcastle's plan of attack should be. And, you know, Arsenal have a lot of the ball a lot of the time, but the question is, can they make something of it? So it's almost having that maturity to understand that they're going to have a lot of the ball and let them have it, but as long as it's in controlled areas. And I think Eddie Howe's a good tactician and Newcastle will be comfortable doing that.
I honestly, I agree exactly the same as what you said there, Harry. I think Newcastle will conserve it quite a bit. I think we'll literally let you have the ball a lot during this fixture, depending on how the first 45 minutes goes. I think you're correct what you're saying about Isak. Isak can literally do everything that any single football fan across the world would love an Alexander Isak in their team, because, like you mentioned, he plays on the shoulder of a defender quite a lot, and he makes these bursting runs, and you'll see the highlights where he's getting opportunities from them, but he does that throughout the game. The ball doesn't come to him at times. He's constantly making these runs, and like you said, he can drop on the left hand side. We're seeing quite a bit, or he'll even come deep, Harry Kane-esque, look for the ball in midfield and look at basically back to goal, pass and move and start that moving off again. I think it's going to be that game plan from us. I think we'll pick and choose our moments and rely on the likes of Anthony Gordon, Jacob Murphy, and Isaac. And we can't forget the likes of Bruno Guimaraes was missing in that first tie as well. So having his creativity in midfield is going to be crucial as well. One of the factors is that midfield trio that we've had with Bruno, Tonali, and Joe Linton has been monumental, especially that 9-win streak that we went on in both obviously cups and the Premier League competitions. Joe Linton is a doubt for the game, and I think we'll lose a lot when Joe Linton isn't in there. I think there probably isn't a player. Well, I know for fine well there isn't a player in the squad that can replace his physicality. Whether that Eddie Howe, if Joe Linton misses a game, if he goes with Joel Willock like he did to replace Bruno in the first leg, or if he brings Sean Longstaff in, that all depends on the game plan. If we're looking at grabbing that first goal, yes, Willock's going to be your first choice. If not, if you're looking at going with a more defensive and a conservative approach, it's probably going to be Sean Longstaff that's going to cover every blade of grass. Of course he is, and he's going to do a lot of the dirty work that you're not going to see from the likes of Bruno. Once again, it just depends how Eddie Howe shuts up shop, if he shuts up shop or goes for it. And that's. Do you think that's going to play a factor in regards to how Arteta's going to set the team up, or do you just think it's just now or never? Because that's my thoughts on it. You have to do something.
Yeah, I think Arteta will want to take the game to Newcastle. I think I talked about Arsenal being a little bit more mature than they have been in the past, and maybe understanding when they are under a bit of pressure, because there will be periods like that at St. James's Park. There's no doubt about that. And it's about knowing when to drop off and get in your shape and ride out a storm. And I think this Arsenal team are much better at doing that than they have been in previous years. But I think it's clear to me what he's going to go with. He's only got one centre forward at the moment, so there's no debate around that. It's probably
welcome to the party, mate. We've only got one as well.
Exactly. I think he'll probably want to utilize Martinelli's pace. It's going to be really interesting for me to see if he brings Ethan Nwaneri into the starting 11, because he was in the 11, picked up that injury, and then dropped out of the 11 for a couple of games, but then obviously comes off the bench against Manchester City and scores that stunning goal from the right. And he's been a godsend in terms of dealing with the Saka absence. So be interested to see if he comes in. The midfield, Arsenal's best midfield for me is clearly Partey, Rice, and Odegaard. Like, it's not even a debate. Mikel Merino, who you guys know a bit about, of course, has come in. He hasn't really pulled up any trees, if we're being honest, and I'll be shocked if he starts the game. So I think it's pretty clear and obvious what Mikel Arteta is going to do, what the intention's going to be. The question is, can Arsenal show that sort of clinical edge in front of goal that they did against Manchester City? Because I don't doubt that they'll create situations. It's just whether they can take them. And if they get one goal and just, and I'm not saying that the crowd at St. James's Park is ever going to be completely deflated, because it's a wonderful place to watch football. But if you go into the game buoyant, expecting to make it through to the final, you're 2-0 up, you feel relatively comfortable, and then an Arsenal side that have just battered Manchester City turn up and score inside the first 20 minutes, then that can create nerves. And I do believe, I'm a big believer that nerves in the stands translates onto the pitch as well. And I'll be interested to see, how that first 20 minutes goes, because I think it'll be massive in terms of the outcome of the tie overall.
You're correct what you're saying, that first goal is crucial. And I think no matter when it comes, if it's in the first 45 or later on in the game, it's massive, that first goal, because anything can happen after that, especially if Arsenal grab that. And you're correct what you're saying. I don't think it's a dig at Newcastle fans or anything like that, but if we go a goal down, the atmosphere will take a huge dip. We've seen throughout the season, the atmosphere hasn't been great. And that's not just St. James's Park. I think that's across the Premier League and the rest of the football pyramid. It's just something where it's not what it once was. I sit in what you would class as the lively end of St. James's Park. And it's loud now, a little pocket, but it doesn't really carry on through the rest of the stadium. But even when we go goal down, it gets nervy in our corner as well. So I think the fans are going to play a huge part of it. Of course, there are. I'm not sure how many fans are coming up from an Arsenal point of view, because obviously the cup game, you get an extra percentage that'll come up to St. James's Park. And that does worry us. The crowd and the atmosphere massively worries me. I think if things can turn, like you've mentioned, they'll turn on the field as well, and players will get a bit antsy as well. They'll they'll not want the ball in certain situations. We can see players go hiding at times. We saw it against Fulham, where when Fulham get the equaliser, we're just going into our shells a little bit. In a game of this importance and being 90 minutes away from a final at Wembley, especially from a Newcastle fan's point of view, we don't get there very often. So I think it's a fact that just a few weeks ago, like I mentioned earlier, it was in touching distance, and it still is, and everybody was on cloud nine previously. But the recent run in form, home form that is, then obviously the resurgence that you have had as well since the defeat at the Emirates worries me a little bit. I'm not writing the game off, far from it, because if we obviously don't progress and make the final, that's on us, 100% on us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about it the other way around. Like, obviously, I said to you that I feel a lot more confident than I would have done 2-3 weeks ago. Absolutely, but you know, for a while now, we've found it really difficult to break down Newcastle United sides. Where we've struggled to break teams down this season, we've been able to lean on our physicality and on our dominance from set pieces. And I don't think we necessarily have that advantage over a very powerful Newcastle team. So that worries me. I've seen a lot of lackluster Arsenal performances this year where, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's been lots of possession. But what has that possession actually amounted to in terms of clear goal scoring opportunities? And, you know, after what we saw the other day, I'm just desperate for us not to kind of slip back into that mode of moving the ball really slowly, going from left to right. And I've criticized Mikel Arteta this season because I felt that at times the team has been overcoached and over drilled to the point where there's no willingness to take any risk. And it's like we've got the ball and it's all about control. And it's almost as if there's this belief that if we have most of the ball, then our chances of winning the game are significantly increased. To a point, that's correct. But it's what you're doing with that ball as well and what you're doing with that possession. And a bit like us, when I look at us defending, I feel like Newcastle are a great side when it comes to soaking up. And when you've got the quality that you have in the final third as well, the pace that you have, the runners that you have, you're a threat on the break. So there's certain teams like Manchester City came to the Emirates at the weekend and came out to play us and played a high line and left lots of spaces and had a vulnerable midfield because it wasn't very physical or defensive minded. And I looked at that and I rubbed my hands together because I thought this is exactly what we want. And I came away from that game hearing Arsenal fans saying, why don't we play like that every week? Well, because we don't have that space every week. We don't have that room every week. Newcastle are the opposite of that when they play us. They know exactly what spaces to plug. They know exactly how to frustrate us. And if we try and bully them, we're not going to get much joy because they can't be bullied. And so it feels like you're a bit of our kryptonite. And that's what worries me, despite Arsenal's upturning form.
I've heard a lot of Newcastle fans over the last couple of weeks saying that maybe Arsenal won't be too bothered about this competition, with it being Carabao Cup and obviously still highly invested in the rest of the competitions. Is that true? Is that a factor into the game?
I think historically, I would have said that it's at the bottom of our priority list. It has been for a while.
Yeah.
The FA Cup is a competition that Arsenal have got a great affiliation with. And I think in the minds of the fans, that one always takes precedent over the League Cup. Yeah. Obviously, we're out of that now, which increases the importance of this one. But also, I think we've got to the point in the Mikel Arteta journey now where we need something tangible to show the progress that we've made. It's undeniable that the team's improved. It's undeniable that we've got better. It's undeniable that we're competitive again. But getting over the line that first time in terms of winning a major trophy with this team, because Arteta won the FA Cup with a completely different team. He won it with Unai Emery's team. But, you know, just to be able to get over the line, I think could be the start of a really fruitful period for Arsenal. You think about some of those players and their ages, your Sakas, your Salibas, even Gabriel's mid-20s. You know, you look at Miles Lewis-Skelly at 18 playing at left-back now, Nwaneri, 17, Martinelli's early 20s, Declan Rice sort of mid-20s. It's a group that still has so much more to give, but that first hurdle is the biggest hurdle. If we can get over it, then I'm confident we can go on and do more. But the first one is the hardest one, and you guys are standing in our way now. Add to that the deficit that you already have. You know, I don't. If we did get through, I wouldn't fancy Liverpool in the final. I'd hope for the North London derby because it's just very Tottenham, isn't it, to get to a final? And
everybody wants Tottenham.
Yeah,
everybody wants Tottenham.
Exactly. Dr. Tottenham will see you now. So yeah, it's just like I think we'd love to see it. Look, I'm 34 years old, and I don't remember the last time Arsenal won the League Cup. I was 3 years old at the time. So for me, it's one that's missing from the set. So it does have that significance, but I'd be lying
if you want to make it into a competition, Harry. 50s, mid-50s, the last time Newcastle were even close, mate.
But at the same time, like I would be lying if I said that at the outset this season it was the one that I was desperate for. But things change, don't they? The picture changes, the scenario adapts, and here we are now desperate for silverware, and this is the one that I know we're 2-0 down, but we feel like we've got the best chance in, given how difficult it is going to be to catch Liverpool, and obviously how difficult it is to win the Champions League.
Of course. So get to the point where we're going to do with fixtures, mate. Asked me this question a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's going to be a similar performance where it'll be a dominant Newcastle performance. Jump forward 4 weeks, and I'm nervous. I'm not going to lie, because you mentioned Dr. Tottenham will see you now. That used to be Newcastle United's phrase. And being a Newcastle fan, I've still got these memories and the PTSD kicks in about these moments where we can throw things away, and it would be typical Newcastle United to do it. But having said that, we are not that same team that we once used to be. And I feel as if that we could go and get a result, and by a result, I mean, even a 1-0 defeat, right now you're snatching the hands off, because that makes no impact in regards to what getting to the final is. But I think the worry for me, like I mentioned a couple of times, is Arsenal getting that first goal. And I think that may happen, which is going to have a huge impact. It's just how quick we bounce back from that. I think it's going to be a very anxious night for everybody involved. I think, though, for a score prediction, I don't think it'll be a great game to watch. I really don't. I think a lot of it will be backs against the wall for Newcastle for large chunks of that game, and we'll pick and choose what opportunities to push forward, which may frustrate the fan base in the stadium. But I think it'll be a 1-1 draw, score draw.
I think Arsenal win it 1-0, but don't do enough to get through. Is how I see it. I feel like, we've touched on it already, but the kind of the moments that we're both in, like you guys have had a couple of disappointing results at home. We've had a really good result at the weekend that we're obviously buzzing about. And I think with Arsenal as well, what's really interesting is that obviously we don't play at the weekend because we're out of the FA Cup. And we know that the Arsenal team are planning, as confirmed by Mikel Arteta today, to go off and have one of those warm weather training camps, which seem to be the kind of sparking point for our really strong run in the second half of last season, that time around. And I'm not saying that will have a massive impact, but I think for our players, they know that this is the last push before they're going to get that deserved break. And just imagine how much better the atmosphere will be within the camp if they can go into that break and prepare for the real business end of the season, if they've just booked their place in a final. So I feel like because we know that there's a gap coming, it could be an extra motivation to go out there and give maybe a little bit more than you normally would or could. And that's kind of my hope. But I realize I'm speaking in hope more than anything else. If I was a betting man, I'd be betting on Newcastle to get through every single day of the week. But it's football and you never know. And if you turn up at St. James's Park not believing, then what the hell's the point?
Exactly. You mentioned the odds. Odds don't look good for Arsenal, far from it, which they're always going to do with the two coming back from a 2-0 deficit there. So, but do you know what it is? I'm sitting here, and the more I think about it, I'm thinking, we'll go and smash these. Like, the more I'm thinking about, but this is just what I do as a fan, because it does seem that it's very hit and miss with Arsenal when they come to St. James's Park. You did get a result a couple of seasons ago, I think it was. I think it was 2-0 that you got, but then it's been hit and miss. You had the one, obviously, where there's still a debate if the ball was in or out, which was,
don't get me started on that game. Don't get me started on that game.
Then you've got the one which was the end of the season, where there was a big display in St. James's Park. You were pushing for the title. I think at that point, Newcastle were pushing to finish in the Champions League spot, and Newcastle had the number on that one. It just seems like you said before, Newcastle seemed to be Arsenal's kryptonite at certain points in the season. It's a huge opportunity for both clubs. It really is. I wish you all the best after Wednesday night, but we need this more than you, mate.
No, me too. I wish you guys all the best after this. Of course, I've always had a sort of a soft spot for Newcastle, because I remember sort of growing up at the heat of our rivalry with Manchester United and looking around for clubs that hated Manchester United as much as we did. And it was nice to know that there was a club out there that understood where we were coming from. I don't have a soft spot for Liverpool. I'm not going to even claim that's the case, but I quite liked Rafa Benitez, who obviously went on to manage you guys, because he came out with the facts, didn't he, about Alex Ferguson and all that he felt was going on. So there is a bit of a sort of connection there because of that. But I think a lot of Arsenal fans find Newcastle unlikable now. And I don't think it's necessarily because of any history or anything, but it's because we get frustrated by the fact that Newcastle are humble enough, I think, under Eddie Howe to go, yeah, this is the way that we want to play, but we know that if we play this way, we're going to cause you all sorts of problems. And because they seem to have found that formula, because they're happy to run the clock down, just like we are in certain game states, I'm not digging them out for it. It feels like, it's a rivalry that's developed over the last few years, but actually, if you scratch beneath the surface, there's probably quite a few similarities.
100%, mate. I think that there are a lot more similarities than what there is. I think that the rivalry is a bit of a false rivalry. It's probably came because of there has been some sort of debate in a lot of the games between themselves of recent years, and I think Arteta probably hasn't helped to a certain degree, because he's gone into press conference afterwards and kicked right off, calling it a disgrace, absolutely booting right off. But I think, like you said, there's a lot of similarities, and I think one of the things is the dark arts, which Newcastle used to be referred to as, and we've kind of lost that a little bit. I'm not going to lie, we have lost it to what we were the season we finished fourth, because we used that quite a lot as a tactic to slow the clock down. I would like to see some of it back, because I think it has just slowly disintegrated from the team, and I think it's transferred across to Arsenal in certain points of games as well. But it's one of every football club does it, mate. Of course they do, but some of them are a lot more obvious, and Newcastle are very, very obvious at, we're going to frustrate you, we are going to wind you up. And that wasn't just Arsenal, that was every single team that we came up against in that push for the Champions League, because you've got to be ruthless sometimes, mate. And if it's winning your games, then
that's it.
Got to go with it.
That's it. I'll tell you who the Arsenal fans really don't like, and that's Jason Tindall. I don't think there's too much animosity towards Eddie Howe, if I'm being honest, but Jason Tindall, just every time you guys turn up at the Emirates and I'm sort of sitting just behind the Newcastle dugout, he's just like, he's always up, he's always complaining, he's always in the face of the fourth official, and it's just, I mean, Arteta can be a handful at times as well, I admit. But I think that the Arsenal fans' gripe is more with Jason Tindall than it is with Eddie Howe.
Mate, he loves it. Jason Tindall loves the attention. He absolutely thrives off it. He's one of those coaches that you see behind the scenes, and he always seems to be at the very front of whatever's happening. And do you know what it is? It's not just Arsenal fans. I think there's a lot of clubs that don't like Jason Tindall, because he's our nickname for Tindall up here is Mad Dog, because he's always involved, mate. And I think you're never going to remove. You saw the Premier League bring in the rule about only having one coach in the technical area. That never happened. No. Like, it's still, obviously everybody still does it, but
that rule
was mainly because of Eddie Howe and Jason Tindall.
Yeah, it's a rule that's Jason Tindall proof, isn't it?
100%. I wouldn't like to try and keep it on his seat, I'll tell you that, mate. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, Harry, as always. Let everybody know where they can grab your stuff, mate.
Thanks for having me, mate. Really, really appreciate it, and keep up the cracking work. You can find me on X at Harry Simiyu. And if you're interested in any Arsenal content, I don't know why you would be, but the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast is where I talk Arsenal on a daily basis. So thanks for having me, mate. And as I say, I wish you all the best after tomorrow. But until then, I wish you all the rotten luck in the world.
Thanks, mate.